Welcome to Earth Day of the Future. Whoops. It's Earth Day, and instead of talking about trees, we're talking about stakes. As in, what's at stake if we don't take care of the planet? And intentionally or not, we often reflect our real-world cultural fears in our pop culture. Zombies reflect fears of overpopulation, and big radioactive monsters like Godzilla were reflections of the nuclear fears we had back in the 40s and 50s. So what about all the movies about a blasted, unlivable Earth? To help us along is film critic, writer, and survivor of the apocalypse, William Bibbiani. Thank you so much for joining us today. All right, William, what do you got for me?
Well, when you're talking about films that express our fears about the environment, they tend not to actually be so much about the environment, but the way that we're afraid the changes in the environment are going to affect us on a personal level. Sure. We're not so much worried about the fate of the planet. As George Carlin said, the planet's going to be fine. We're the ones who are screwed.
Right.
So a lot of the films I was thinking of sort of focus on different aspects of that, and one of them, you cannot talk about environmental apocalypse movies without talking about Roland Emmerich's The Day After Tomorrow. It's the guilt-trippingest movie you will ever see. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars to shame us into thinking about global warming. It's fantastic. Right. And here is a movie that, when you look at it, it's actually a very personal film. Roland Emmerich co-wrote it, and it's about the effect that we're going to have on the environment, but they accelerated the timeline so that the things that we sort of gloss over because they're not going to happen to us are going to happen to our grandkids or our great-grandkids or 100 times over great-grandkids. If they happened the day after tomorrow, we would be appalled. Sure. And the movie is kind of crap. The movie is you know, it's bad dialogue. It reduces the entire fate of the human race to whether or not Jake Gyllenhaal is going to hook up with Emmy Rossum. It's cheesy. It's cheesy, but its heart is in a halfway decent place. The science is terrible, but it's not about the science. It's about the science in the same way that Frankenstein is about how to actually reanimate the dead. It's a lesson. It's sincerely meant. It's crappy, but it's all about our fears of we didn't listen. It is a didactic film. It's a shamefacedly just bald-faced message movie without shame, but it's a fun one, and Roland Emmerich knows how to blow up the Earth like nobody's business. What do we have next? What do we have next? Oh God, what do we have next? Silent Running is considered by many to be the first environmentalist film. It takes place in the future, after all vegetation on Earth has died. Now, humanity is still going, but they exist on processed foods. They no longer have any connection to the environment, and Bruce Dern plays a parkskeeper who manages the last forest that exists in a satellite floating above the world, and he's waiting to hear back from Earth to say, hey, bring the forests back, we can repopulate the planet, and instead they say, blow it up, we don't need it anymore. So he goes a little batty and he kills the rest of the crew, and he tries to make the entire, he tries to hide out with the forest in space, try to keep it going without any human connection, and eventually he discovers that he needs human connection as much as humans need the environment. So he's like future Tarzan. He's a little bit like future Tarzan, except not at all. Right. It's actually a little bit more like Joel Robinson and Mystery Science Theater 3000, yeah. Which was actually heavily inspired by Silent Running, because he's got these 3 little robots who are adorable, and he teaches them to play poker, and he tries to connect with them on a human level, but it doesn't work, and he starts really feeling the isolation. So it's a film that's in many ways about the anxiety about preserving these forests and the lengths to which we're willing to go to preserve the environment, but also about the potential to disconnect with humanity in the process, that we can overly, that we can place too much emphasis on the environment and not enough emphasis also on the way that we connect to other people. Sure. Which is a pretty bold statement for the first environmentalist film. Yeah. Another film that I would highly recommend, and this is a film that's a little maybe an unusual choice, but it's called Pompoko. It's from director Isao Takahata, the guy who did Grave of the Fireflies, which was about the nuclear devastation in Tokyo. Sure. This is a film that's about deforestation in Japan and the way that it affects a race of raccoons. And the raccoons, in order to protect their land, in order to protect their people, become eco-terrorists in their own right. They start trying to take down the various, tractors and bulldozers. And they use magical shape-shifting scrotums, which is a little different. All right, no, I'm still with you. It's a kid's film, and it is. I digress. But what they discover over time is that their efforts to preserve the forest are they're too much, and eventually it's about the apocalypse of their culture. But by the end of the film, they're through fighting. They can't do it anymore, and they end up having to live with Western civilization, but sort of underground, and their culture has completely died because of the way that we have affected our environment, and so their naturalistic way of life is gone.
Wow.
So it's an apocalyptic film from a cultural perspective, but not necessarily from a global perspective, but that's something we're afraid of too. A lot of the things that we're afraid of are about changing the way we live, changing the things that make us comfortable, you know, having to go through a radical shift in order to survive in a new world. And one of the best films to illustrate that, although it's not the best film per se, but it's a very well thought out allegory, is a film called Daybreakers by the Spierig brothers. And that's a film that a lot of people don't like very much. I think it's kind of underrated. It takes place in the near future. Vampirism, turns out it's real, and turns out it's awesome, so everyone goes for it. Like, we can live forever? Badass! Let's do that! Let's do that! That's gonna be awesome! The problem is everyone goes for it, and everyone starts consuming human blood to the point where there are no more humans left. And here's a film that's about the moment when we're going to run out of natural resources. It's a thing that always seems like, again, it's going to be the day after tomorrow. Sure. We don't need to think about it now. But the day is going to come, according to environmentalists, when we're just going to run out of oil. There's just not going to be any left. And that exact day, when that news breaks, people are going to go out of their minds.
Oh, it's going to be crazy.
But yeah, it's a good film, and it kind of nicely illustrates our fears of the day that's coming.
Sure.
The exact day, and the riots that are going to break out.
Right.
You know? So, stock up. The last film I want to talk about, though, is a film that I think everyone has seen because it is a wonderful piece of filmmaking. It's WALL-E. Pixar's WALL-E. A lot of people love this movie, and as well they should. It's about a post-apocalyptic future where Earth has been devastated by overconsumption of natural resources, by just trash everywhere. Yeah. We just threw crap out the window. And it's about a robot, and he's going to learn how to love, and all that stuff's really, really sweet. But the way that WALL-E, I think WALL-E's deeper meaning and its deeper resonance and the way that it reflects our anxieties is when we finally go out into space and we start seeing humanity. And humanity is depressing.
So depressing.
Humanity is gross. Humanity, we have devolved into gelatinous blobs that can barely even move on our own power. All we can do is sit and watch TV and consume more products because Walmart is the only governing body that has survived.
Right.
And that's not so much our fear about the future as I think that's a mirror to what we are now.
Sure.
I think that's the greater message of WALL-E is, you know, if all we're going to do is think of ourselves and our own superficial needs and the way we can fit in with various trends or give in to various marketing schemes, we're not going to think of anything important. And part of that is human interaction. Part of that is the world at large. Pretty much every ecological disaster movie is in its own way a Frankenstein film. It's about the way that we have messed up the environment and the way that the environment is going to fight back. A lot of them have to do with man as a monster. Man is a selfish beast who destroys the world and gets a lot of people killed and has to deal with the guilt and the shame of those consequences.
Sure.
It's your fault. You, on the internet. Don't write a YouTube comment about that. You just accept it.
Obviously, we can't predict the future, but we can look at the practices in place today and see what our impact is on the environment. That can mean small steps like planting a tree in your backyard or signing a petition to give an eco-friendly legislator a little political clout. On that note, you should click the link in the description below to tell Obama that he needs to make climate change a big priority in his second term. For BFD, I'm Marisha Ray. Don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget, Master Blaster runs Bartertown.